Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathiran kathira. Amma ba'du, my dear brothers and sisters, we humans are social creatures. We all have different relationships in our lives and understand that every relationship comes with rights and privileges. The rights of a relationship are our duties towards the one we are related to. The privileges come from being related to that entity. For example, we are related to our parents and we try to fulfill the rights of our parents on us. As a result, we have the privilege of using their name, getting the benefit of their dua, and inheriting from them. We are related to the nation that we are citizens of. Since most of you here are immigrants to this country, let me ask you how you felt when you got an American passport in your hand. That is America telling you and the world, this person is ours, belongs to America. How did you feel? It was something you applied for and maybe you prayed day and night for it. And finally you got it. How did you feel? Similar is the case with all our relationships. The basic law about relationships is that the more fundamental the relationship, the more important it is, and so it gets precedence over other relationships. Our relationship with our parents supersedes our relationships with anyone else. Our relationship to our country supersedes our relationship to another country that we may be living in. What then about the two most fundamental relationships that we have, which are not only primordial and foundational, but which are the only two that will transcend death and remain with us when we leave this life for the hereafter? What are those relationships and what are their rights and what are our privileges from acknowledging and fulfilling the rights and being faithful to those two relationships? These two fundamental relationships are our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala jalla jalaluhu and with His Messenger Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. These two are unlike any other relationship because of what we owe them and the privileges they bestow upon us, and so fulfilling their rights must be our highest priority. With this context, let me ask you and myself a question. What happens to us when we hear the name Allah? I want you to concentrate on this and check your heart when you hear Allah. Like you hear in the Adhan, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. I say this because before we can start talking about the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on us, we must first ask if we know and recognize Allah. To be concerned about fulfilling the rights of someone, we must first love them. To love someone, we must know them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about us, about the believers, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Anfal, which means the believers are only those إنما المؤمنون. The believers are only those who, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, their hearts shiver with His awe and glory and majesty. And when His ayat, the Quran, are recited unto them, the ayat, increase their iman, increase their faith. And these people, they put their trust in their Rabb alone. وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called a responsive heart the sign of belief. Do we have it? It is essential to check this and to repair our connection with Allah, because one day we will meet Allah. We must reflect on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes and His mercy and blessings and express our thanks to Him to build our connection with Him Jalla Jalaluhu. Only then will it become clear why we must fulfill His rights before we do anything else. It's only when the glory and magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permeates our hearts that the darkness of this world and all that it promises or threatens us with will be dispelled. Our hearts will be illuminated with the khashyat, with the awe and magnificence and glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a light that transcends this life and will be with us in our graves, inshallah. And on the day when we need it the most, this light will be with us, and that is the day of judgment. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this, for myself and for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala introduced Himself and described Himself as only He can do. And He said, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum la ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm lahu ma fi as-samawati wa ma fi al-ard man dha alladhi yashfa'u 'indahu illa bi'idhnihi يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله والله أكبر الله أكبر ولله الحمد. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون. هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. Let us reflect on every word of these ayat. I'm not translating them because I know you know the meanings. Let us reflect on every word of these ayat and see what our connection is with our Rabb Jalla Jalaluhu. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His ayat and their effect on our hearts. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by looking at His creation around us. We recognize Allah Jalla Jalaluhu in the pulsating lights of the aurora borealis, testimony to the magnetic shield that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed to burn off solar flares and debris, without which our planet would simply go up in flames. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the call of the blue whale when it calls off the coast of California and is heard off the coast of Japan across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the longevity of the Great Basin bristlecone pine, which has lived for 5,000 years and is still living. This means that this tree was over 1,000 years old when Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam were building the Kaaba. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way elephants communicate across hundreds of miles of savanna. One herd talks to the other. We don't know how. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the communication of acacia trees, which warn other acacia trees many miles away, out of sight, that antelopes, kudu, nyala and so on, are browsing on them so that they can secrete toxic, bitter oils in their leaves to prevent them from being eaten. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the kaleidoscopic, pulsating colors of the dorado, which turns to a dull grey as soon as it dies. And we recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the tail dance of the black marlin, when he bites off the dorado just behind the head, so he doesn't get hooked, and dances to thumb his nose at you. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the power of the black marlin, which can do 80 miles an hour through the ocean. We recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as you sit in the hot sun, sweltering heat, bathed in sweat, on your boat in the Mozambique Channel current of the Indian Ocean, the color of ink. And we remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْفَدَ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّي وَلَوْ جِئْنَا بِمِثْلِهِ مَدَدًا. Say, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, to all of humanity, if the sea were ink to write with, the words of my Rabb, surely the sea would be exhausted before the words of my Rabb would be finished, even if we brought another sea like it for its aid. We remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded us about, and beg Him to make us among His thankful slaves. وَآتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ ظَلُومٌ كَفَّارٌ. And He gave you all that you asked for. And if you count the blessings of Allah, never will you be able to count them. Man is indeed an extreme wrongdoer and a disbeliever. We ask Allah to save us from being that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the sole creator and sustainer of the universe. He is the Almighty. He is Al-Hayyul Qayyum. He is the one who created everything with absolute wisdom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who initiated every being from nothing. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu told us about our duty and reminded us about our privilege. To live our purpose is to live a worthy life. To get distracted and spend our lives chasing the dunya is unworthy. Allah said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ مَا أُرِيدُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ يُطْعِمُونَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الرَّزَّاقُ ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, which means, and I, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Jalla Jalaluhu, did not create the jinn and humans except that they should worship me alone. I seek not any provision from them, either for themselves or for my creatures. Nor do I ask that they should feed me, which is feed themselves or my creatures. Verily Allah is the all-provider, the owner of power, and the strongest. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what happens to us when we are reminded about the purpose of our creation. Shaitan frightens us with poverty and starvation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warned us about this and comforted us and reminded us about His own power and glory. We must reflect on this, not just recite it. الشيطان يعدكم الفقر ويأمركم بالفحشاء والله يعدكم مغفرة منه وفضلا والله واسع عليم. Shaitan threatens you with poverty and orders you to commit evil deeds, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fahsha, evil and shameless deeds, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises you forgiveness from Himself and bounty, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all sufficient for His creatures, for their needs, and He is the all-knower. He knows everything. I remind myself and you that in Islam, ibadah is any action that we do with the intention of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seeking reward from Him. Earning halal sustenance with the intention of pleasing Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is ibadah. The key is to decide based on only one criteria. Does it please Allah? Islam is that simple. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us to do only what we can do. When He told us that He created us for His worship, then we must understand that it is possible to live our lives in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the method by which our life can become ibadah, can become an act of worship, everything in our lives. I remind myself anew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that He created us for His worship and promised to take care of all our needs. So what should be our focus, our priority, and the criterion for all our decision making? The rida of Allah. That's it. That is what should be our focus. As a diagnostic tool, let us see what kind of dua we make. Because our dua is the best indicator of what is important for us. Reflect on the dua which most of us make. Oh Allah, grow my business. Give me more money. Increase my sustenance. Give me more power, more authority, and so on and so on. What if we said, instead of saying, oh Allah, grow my business and give me more sustenance, what if we said, oh Allah, guide me and help me to ensure that my business is free from everything that displeases you, and increase my charity, right? Increase what I spend in your path. Let us check to see what we ask more of, dunya or akhirah. It is not prohibited to ask for wealth and worldly things, provided they are halal. But what if we asked Allah to enable us to fulfill the purpose for which He created us in a way that pleases Him? Do you think that dua will deprive us of worldly wealth and comfort? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the kinds of duas that people make. فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا كَسَبُوا وَاللَّهُ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ. Which means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, but of mankind there are some who say, our Rabb, give us your bounty in this world. And for such, there will be no portion in the hereafter. And of them there are some who say, O our Rabb, give us in this world that which is good, and in the hereafter that which is good, and save us from the torment of the fire. For them there will be allotted a share for what they have earned. And Allah is swift in reckoning. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us what should be our primary focus. وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاسْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا لَا نَسْأَلُكَ رِزْقًا نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكَ وَالْآقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. In Surah Taha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and enjoin as-salah on your family, and be patient in establishing of salah. We ask not of you any provision. We provide for you. And the good ending, which is Jannah inshallah, is for the muttaqoon. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among the muttaqoon. My brothers and sisters, I remind you and myself once again that every relationship comes with rights and privileges. What is Allah's right and what is our privilege? In a hadith in Bukhari, Sahih hadith, narrated by Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, O Mu'adh, do you know what Allah's right upon His slaves is? Sayyidina Mu'adh bin Jabal says, I said, Allah and His Messenger know best. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, to worship Him, to worship Allah alone, and to join none in worship with Him. And then he said, do you know what is their right upon Him? Meaning, what is the right of the people who do this, who are on Tawheed, the believers. May Allah make us among them. Do you know what their right is upon Allah? Mu'adh bin Jabal says, I replied, Allah and His Messenger know best. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, not to punish them. Meaning, Allah will not give them adhab. Allah will not punish them. It is their right that they should not be punished if they have lived their lives on Tawheed. If they have not joined any partners with Allah. If they loved Allah. If they had taqwa of Allah. If their sole criterion of decision making was, does it please Allah? My brothers and sisters, this is a guarantee of forgiveness, inshallah, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want to conclude with listing the rights of Allah on us. We will talk about them in detail in the coming weeks, inshallah. The rights of Allah on us are 5. Number 1, believing that none has the right to be worshipped but Allah. That is Iman. Number 2, ibadah. To worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone without any partners. Number 3 is shukr, gratitude, which is giving thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His blessing. Number 4, having fear and hope only in Allah. The position of the Muslim is bain al-khawfi wa tama', between fear and hope, and having that only from Allah. And number 5, loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than anyone or anything else. 5 rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are they? To believe that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah. Number 2, to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Number 3, to make shukr, to express our gratitude. Number 4, to have fear and hope from Allah alone. And number 5 is to love Allah more than anyone or anything else. Sufyan bin Uyayna, rahmatullah alayh, is one of the great scholars of the Tabi'in, and he was also the Imam of the Haram in Mecca. He said, كان العلماء فيما ماضي يكتب بعضهم إلى بعض هؤلاء الكلمات من عمل لآخرته كفاه الله دنيا ومن أصلح ما بينه وبين الله كفاه الله الناس ومن أصلح سريرته أصلح الله علانيته. He said, which means the scholars of the past used to write to one another the following words of advice. Whoever works for his hereafter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of his dunya. Whoever corrects what is between himself and Allah, Allah will correct what is between him and the people. And whoever corrects his internal affairs, which is purifies his heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will correct for him his public affairs. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us His obedient and grateful slaves, and to be pleased with us and never to be displeased. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث أصلح لنا شأننا كل لا إله إلا أنت وصلى الله على نبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.